Hi, I'm Dustin Abbott, and I'm here today to give you my part one of my two-part review of the new Sony FE 35mm f1.8 lens. Now, this particular lens joins the 55mm f1.8 and the 85mm f1.8 in Sony's lineup of, more affordable, they're certainly not cheap, but more affordable, smaller aperture compared to the f1.4 examples, often covering these focal lengths, that give Sony shooters an option if they want something that is light and compact and yet really optically strong. And so it's been a very popular lineup for Sony for a reason, because it hits the sweet spot for a lot of people. Not everyone feels like they need the larger f1.4 lenses with their higher price tag, and often a bit of a compromised autofocus performance by comparison with the smaller, lighter f1.8 versions. And I think that there are a lot of shooters at the end of the day say that f1.8 is enough for them. Sure, they would like f1.4, and sure, wouldn't all of us love the f1.2 of the new Sigma 35mm f1.2 art lens that I reviewed recently, but not everyone wants the price tag, and certainly not everyone wants the massive size of such a lens. And so there's a lot of people that a lens like this hits the sweet spot. However, the 35mm f1.8 does face an additional challenge that was not true when the 55mm f1.8 was released, or even when the 85mm f1.8 was released, and that is that the market has gotten a lot more saturated with cheaper alternatives. And so I think that as we explore this lens and look at the review, the biggest challenge is going to be whether or not it justifies its fairly high price tag of around $800 in the US market compared to some of the cheaper alternatives. So today we're going to look at two things as a part of this review. We're going to look at the build, the handling, the design of the lens, its features. Then we're also going to look at the autofocus performance for both stills and video, and to give a verdict on how that happens. In part two, which will be coming in a week, we will be exploring the image quality and the video performance, along with giving you a final verdict on the lens. And so stay tuned for that. First of all, however, we're going to jump in hands-on and give you a closer look at the design, the build, the specifications of this little guy. So let's take a closer hands-on look at the FE 35mm f1.8. So as you can see, it is quite similar in its overall design aesthetic to the 55mm f1.8. What has changed here is that Sony seems to have moved away from the partnership with Zeiss to the extent that we're not really seeing any Zeiss branding on newer Sony lenses. However, the aesthetic here is really quite similar. You can see that it is a nicely compact lens. We remove the lens hood. The lens hood itself is, pretty generic. It's plastic. It clips in nicely. No problem there. Familiar Sony front pinch cap. If we look at the physical lens, just its dimensions itself, it is very, very compact. It's 2.58 inches in diameter. That's 65.5 millimeters essentially. And it's 2.87 inches or 73 millimeters long. That leaves us with a front filter thread of 55 millimeters, fairly common, easily shared across. There is a nice feeling focus ring in what appears to be metal. Lens material itself all feels to be lightweight metal as well. The focus ring has a nice, overall feel of damping to it. And if we turn the camera on and we put it into manual focus mode, there is enough weight there for precise turning. And Sony does note that this has a linear type focus, and so it should behave in a consistent fashion, even though it is focused by wire. Two things on the lens barrel itself. There is that aforementioned AF/MF switch, which I always prefer to have, and then there is the AF hold button that can be programmed to a variety of different functions, and is always very useful to have because it gives you one other quick control point on the actual lens itself. We can find that there is a lightweight metal lens mount that doesn't feel all that substantial. I've seen this a lot of times. It's probably a very lightweight aluminum to have weight savings. The overall weight of the lens is 9.9 ounces or 281 grams. Just to give you an idea of kind of a physical comparison, I've got the Samyang 35mm f1.4. So yes, 2/3, faster stop, maximum aperture. But as you can see, physically, the little Sony lens is much, much more compact. That's going to be a big deal, of course, for a lot of people. Now, as with the 55mm f1.8, I actually initially reported that it was not weather sealed because try as I might, I cannot find an actual gasket here that is usually the external physical indicator of there being weather sealing. However, like with the 55mm, Sony does say that it is weather sealed. Weather sealed here, weather sealed at the switches on either side of the actual focus ring, and then sealed on the inside behind the actual front plate there. And so it, apparently does have some weather sealing. Inside we have got 9 rounded aperture blades, and you can focus down to 8.7 inches, which is 22.1 centimeters, and there you have a very useful 0.24 times magnification. Always happy to see that because that gives you a lot of extra flexibility, whether you're doing video or stills, where you can get a lot closer to your subject, and also you can put backgrounds out of focus a little bit more. Optically, we've got 11 elements in 9 groups as a part of that optical formula. And of course, we have, Sony's linear type focus drive, which allows focus to be fast and quiet. And so overall, it's got most of the things that you would be looking for. Nice build, nice feature set, and of course, nice and compact. So much like the formula of, say, the 55mm f1.8, we see a very similar type lens profile, build, handling, and then of course also the not evident from the exterior weather sealing that Sony claims is inside, and we're all going to have to trust them on that. But what we do have is a really nicely made, very nicely handling little lens that is actually a great fun to use and extremely useful. I found that just in everyday shooting, I've started to reach for it a lot for shooting video on my channel, and just going out and shooting because of the linear nature of the focus ring, which is nice, it's compact, it's small, it's easy to bring along. So I think that Sony did a great job with designing this lens and making it an attractive form factor for people to use. So how about autofocus? The reality is that Sony has done a great job with these type of lenses, whether it's going back to the much older, even 35mm f2.8. Sony has had very good autofocus performance in these lenses. The 55mm was certainly smoother and quieter in operation than even the Sony Zeiss planar 50mm f1.4 lens. The 85mm f1.8 FE lens is certainly quieter, faster, and smoother than the 85mm f1.4 G Master. I suspect the same is true, although I haven't yet reviewed the Distagon 35mm f1.4. I suspect that's true here as well, in that we have another really great autofocusing lens from Sony in the FE 35mm f1.8. Let's take a look for stills photography and see how it does for quality of focus. So let's take a look at the focus consistency and performance here. So what we can see is that this is a shot, and I've gone back to this a couple of times because I have had a few lenses that didn't want to focus kind of at this distance on this. They wanted to focus on the background. I feel like the Sony really did a good job of determining a little more, using the term intuitively, but it knew that I wanted to focus on the foreground object rather than the background, and so I got autofocus where I wanted it. Now this obviously is somewhat of a challenging shot here. I'm asking it to focus on, an off-center, very small area that's kind of sticking out into the foreground. But as you can see, focus has been achieved really, really beautifully, and with nice detail, I should note there at, kind of that pixel level. And so a really nice job with that image as well. Now you can get very close with this lens, and it has a nice magnification figure. This was a little bit more of a challenging focus situation because of it being close, just the circumstance, but I felt like it did a good job of achieving focus where I wanted it to be. Now here's another situation where there are a fair bit of distractions in the background, and so again I was impressed by its ability to grab focus. And by the way, what you can't tell from this image is that the wind was really whipping, and this, what I was focused on, was moving back and forth. You might be able to get a little bit of sense of movement from some of the ones towards the edges, but it did a good job of holding and tracking, so I could get the shot that I wanted. Now this just illustrates the fact that it also does fine focusing into a backlight situation and at a smaller aperture focusing towards infinity. This may not seem like a big deal, but I have encountered a number of lenses on Sony that for one reason or another struggled in that kind of situation. Now I also wanted to test PET IAF, and so in this case my sleeping cat didn't really want to open his eyes very much, but he opened just enough to where it grabbed onto the eye, and so as you can see our focus at this stage is really along the eyelid, eyebrow, eye ridge, whatever you want to call it there, but we can see that it definitely, it picked up on it just fine and knew where focus should be. Now, because I haven't had a lot of portrait opportunity, probably due to the fact that it's freezing cold outside and not overly pretty all the time, I just did some indoor tests and had my daughter take these shots, just wanting to test human IAF and to see how it did. So as we can see, this is on a Sony A9. We can see we've got beautiful focus on that shot. I just turned and looked in a lot of different directions, giving different perspectives on the eye. We got the fore eye here with great detail. Here's another one kind of turned away, but you can see that it grabbed the eye without issue. Once again, not looking straight on. So just presenting a few at least minor challenges for the camera. In this case, it was a straight on kind of shot, and so you can see very consistently, we're getting the right kind of focus results here on the eye, and so they're in the right kind of focus and detail, and so really strong performance when it comes to IAF as well. So as you can see, focus results are very, very good. I can also say that I have zero complaints, and I mean zero complaints about the quality of focus acquisition. It is fast, it is completely quiet, no issues with that at all. And so let's take a look now for video to see if that is true there as well. We'll take a look at the standard focus pull test and see how it does for quietness and smoothness when making focus transitions. So you can see, very good news there. Focus pulls, they are confident, they are very quiet, they're very smooth. Fantastic lens for video when it comes to that. You can also see from this kind of real world result that as we transition in shooting video out in nature, that the transitions are also smooth, everything looks nice. This will be a great lens to throw on a camera on a gimbal and will be very popular, I think, for those wanting to shoot video for that. And then of course in this case also you can shoot in Super 35 mode and get more of a 50mm-ish normal type perspective, and of course that's also very useful as well. And so as far as part one of my review here, I see a lot of positives here. I like the form factor, I like the build, I like the autofocus performance, all good things. So that leaves the question is it as likable when it comes to the image quality? You're going to have to stay tuned for next week's episode for that. In the meantime, you can check out in the description down below, I've got an image gallery link to where you can go and look at photos, see if you like the look of images coming off of this lens. There's also buying links if you'd like to purchase one for yourself. There is linkage there to follow me on social media, to become a patron, sign up for my newsletter, and if you haven't already, please click that subscribe button right here on YouTube. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.